Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Move Well, Live Well podcast. Your host today, of course, myself and Dave. Dave, how are you getting on?
Yeah, all good. Feeling pumped for today's episode. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, awesome. So we covered last week a little bit around why exercise is so important, why we believe exercise is so important, as well as some of the guidelines around exercise and covering that, the social, mental, and then physical benefits of it. Hopefully it might have given you guys a bit of an idea around some of your whys and tapping a little bit deeper into why you really like to engage in exercise and the benefits it could provide you in your life. And today we're going to start off by incorporating some of that why, but more importantly, incorporating that into setting your golden goal. So hopefully by the end of this episode, you'll know exactly how to set your perfect goal, and more importantly, why goals are so important in terms of helping you get that sense of achievement and what that can do in terms of keeping you accountable and staying on track to reaching, this person that you want to become and this person you want to be. Dave, ready to get stuck into it?
Ready to get stuck in. And as Antonio mentioned, this is a really important episode because a lot of people, they can be quite wishy-washy with their goals. We talked about kind of where we want to get to, but today, we really want to help you guys lock in and leave today feeling that sense of purpose, having that goal, ultimately how you can set it, why it is important for you to set it, and all the steps that you can take to get there. So it's going to be a really great episode for you guys. And if you're ready, we'll get stuck in.
Awesome. Yeah, so the why, right? Behind any good goal, any sort of long-term goal, there has to be the why, which we spoke about last episode. And that why, again, it needs to be deeper than just sort of, I want to be in good shape. It needs to have a bit more of a personality behind it, make it personal to you. And of course, we spoke last episode and some of the ways that you can look to start doing that. But Dave, for yourself and your own personal experience, what have you done to really make that why personal and have it something that you really are invested in achieving?
Well, this is it, and this is why it's so important. So now we're going to hear why a lot here. So this is the why is the thing that's going to keep you going when the motivation wanes, because motivation, willpower, it's all temporary. It's a temporary feeling. Some days you're going to get up and you're going to feel so motivated to hit that goal and to be like, right, today I'm going to crack on with it. Other days you're not going to wake up. It might be raining outside. You're like, do I really have to go out and do this today? And you're just not going to be feeling it. But ultimately it's your why that is going to pull you through, making sure that you're staying disciplined and working towards that goal. And what we see is a lot of people can be very, I want to lose fat. And it's kind of like, okay, but why do you want to lose fat? What are the benefits around that? That's ultimately going to keep you disciplined and consistent. Because if you wake up and you're like, one day you don't want to do it, whatever that thing is, and then you come back to your why and it's like, I want to lose fat, is that really strong enough to keep you going when those times get tough? And something that we really want to speak about today is how to find that deeper why, where you can find that discipline and ultimately get there. So I know that you have some great tools and insight about how we can get and find that deeper why. So let's get stuck into that today.
Yeah, 100%. So as I spoke about briefly on the last episode, it's trying to understand who you're wanting to become or the purpose that it is serving you on that why. And how I like to do that is by tying it back down to values and characteristics. So as I said last week, I gave Dave that question of when we strip everything away from you, who is that person that you're trying to portray to the world? But more importantly, portray to yourself, because if you're constantly trying to live up to how others perceive you, you're always going to be going around in circles, or you're going to turn into that people pleaser. But yeah, those values, I always say, try and stick with 6 values. So you might turn around and say, okay, I want to be disciplined. I want to be hardworking. I want to be accountable. I want to be reliable, etc. These are all things that, especially sport, if you're looking at it from an individual side, can provide you with actually saying that's who I'm going to become. Or why losing weight? Okay, that's fantastic. But what does losing weight mean? Well, actually, if you're someone that can get themselves into shape, then turning up every day, proving that you're someone that's accountable, proving that you're disciplined, proving your hard work. Well, Dave, what do you think that does if you're turning around and you're doing that week in, week out? What does that do to you as a person?
I think the biggest benefit that we see for a lot of the time is the confidence thing and that self-belief, because if you start proving to yourself that you are a person that can set goals and stick to it with your daily habits and do all the things that you said you do, every time you tick off a day, every time you hit that green square and you hit all your daily actions to help you get to a goal, you are proving to yourself that you are becoming the person that you want to be. And never devalue how important that is in improving your confidence and proving to yourself that you can actually work towards the goals that you set yourselves. And that's why those daily habits and those daily, what are you doing to point that needle into the person you've got to, that's why it can be so important for you to then tick that off, which is really key, obviously. And then, as I say, that then builds, taking that action then builds motivation, and that motivation then turns into more action. So it's kind of like this amazing cycle of proving to yourself you can do the hard thing, and then that gives you more motivation to then do more of the things that get there. And we see that a lot, where once you start stacking those wins towards your goal, it's really, really amazing to see. And that self-belief can then often leak into other areas of your life. So if it's a personal fitness goal, you might then see that bleed over into confidence in your work job. If I can do this, if I can lose that amount of weight, or if I can hit that 5k PB or whatever it is, then maybe I can go up to my boss and have that difficult conversation, or I can speak about more responsibility that I want to take up in my role, or whatever it is. And that's really the importance of why we want to do this, right?
Yeah, 100%. And just while you're speaking there as well, what I wanted to focus on was also when you're looking to assess that, well, yes, we've got the values behind it. So you're saying I am who I believe myself to be, or you're having that bit of validation, not validation for anyone else, validation to yourself in saying that, like, okay, I want to be this person, I'm now working towards doing that, and by losing this weight, that's how I'm going to prove it to myself. So it's rather than it being this sort of I want to look this way because of how people are going to perceive me, it's actually I want to look this way because it's going to show to me that I can be this type of person. But then also it's like, okay, well, looking at your life, and we spoke really well. Well, I'm very biased. I believe we spoke really well last episode on all the areas that exercise and sport can serve you in terms of those three fundamental areas. So mental, social, and then physical. Think to yourself about, okay, well, actually in the long term, when I'm sitting here and I can think about, hopefully you have a nice long life. What do I want to actually get out of it? Do I want to be able to stay in shape so that when I have kids, or wherever you are in terms of your age, have grandkids, I want to make sure I can take them out on walks. I want to engage in social fun activities such as, just playing, what's that one where it was the ball on the string?
Swing ball.
Oh. Yeah, and get nice and competitive. Or I want to be able to go on hikes. I want to be, all these sort of things. Well, actually, the goals that you set yourself now are making sure that you are leading that life that's going to be in line with those long-term aspirations. Well, that's where it comes down to those, the small things you're doing in the evening that could be, sitting down watching Netflix instead of going for that walk, that are going to take you away from this life that you want in the long term.
And that's it. And for example, if we were speaking solely about the gym, you'd be like, okay, why do you want to go to the gym? I want to get stronger. Okay, but why do you want to get stronger? And they'd be like, so I can pick up my kids, I can put them on my shoulders without feeling that pain in my lower back. Or it could be, when I get older, I can wipe my own ass, or something like that. And that is a much deeper why than just being like, I just want to get stronger to do X, Y, or Z. So you're actually then picking apart and be like, that is how it's going to lead over into my life. So that when we talk about finding your why, that is a deep-rooted why that we want you guys to find. And it could be as trivial as, what I mentioned before, or it could be literally like, when I am in my 80s, 70s, and, I can have my independence, I can get up off the sofa nice and easily, because that's ultimately like what a squat is serving us. Or, it can be wiping your bum or whatever, that, and having that independence that we all want going into later in life. So I think that's really important. And I mean, I guess what would be the main question somebody would ask themselves in order to find that deeper why?
That's a good question. If you want to find your deeper why, I guess it's what is missing from my life right now that exercise could help me fill. That makes sense.
Yeah.
when I think about myself and look at areas that I am less happy in, how can exercise help me build a happier life? Yeah, in fact, what we'll do, we'll leave them at those two for now, because we're going to run through bits around how you can utilize goal setting and the different types of goals to help you get towards that. And I'm sure we'll keep circling around to these whys anyway.
That's exactly it. And so we spoke about finding your deeper why, but then why is it actually important to set yourselves goals? And we see this all the time. Using myself as an example, I've been going to the gym for a long, long time now. And sometimes I do find myself falling out of love with it. And I kind of go in and I am lifting similar weights or similar things that I've done before. And that was kind of before I became a fully qualified coach. Then what was said around that is like, okay, so actually I need to be tracking what I'm doing, or I need to kind of set that goal, because otherwise you're going in, training's a bit stale. You don't really have that sense of purpose. So that's why goals are really important, to give you that sense of purpose. And as we briefly covered in the last episode, is that the opposite of happiness is boredom. So if you don't have that something to strive towards, if you are not measuring where you are getting to, ultimately you're going to find you've got a lack of purpose, a lack of structure. You're not going to be too sure how and why you are working towards something in particular. So in terms of goal setting and why it's so important, that's why we believe it really is. So then you have that sense of purpose. So you're working towards that thing, and that's going to be different for absolutely everybody. So we're not expecting it to be similar across the board. But then, as I mentioned, you've got that sense of purpose and you're working towards it. And ultimately, that's what's going to give you direction. And once you hit that, that's where you're going to get that happiness and that sense of fulfillment from there.
Yeah, awesome. And then in terms of those goals that you can set, so I kind of focus on three main types of goals. So you have your process goals, you have your performance goals, and you have your outcome goals. All right. Now, outcome goals, they are the long term, they're the big picture goals. Okay. The issue we often have with our outcome goals, so the outcome goal could be, let's have a look, running a certain time for a half marathon, or just being able to run a half marathon, right? Fantastic. You've got a goal there. It's kind of a little bit specific. We'll talk about SMART goals in just a second, but a lot of it's sort of out of your control because it's so far ahead. There's lots of things that need to happen and come into place in order to make that goal realistic and something that you've been able to achieve. And the way in which we can work towards this outcome focused goal is by setting ourselves the process goals and performance goals within those little process goals, as we almost take those steps towards that long-term outcome goal.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, because what a lot of people think about is, how do I lose 10 kg? How do I run a marathon? But if you've never completed a kilometer of running, you're worrying way too much. You're majoring way too much in that. And it's actually the little bits that we are going to need to get there, the daily habits, in order to reach this outcome-based goal, as you mentioned. Yeah. So we'll talk about that and how we are going to get there. But first, so obviously we've talked about the importance of doing that. And then we want to go into how, and how do we actually set these goals. And yes, you've probably heard this before, but there is a reason why it's so universal, and that's around SMART-based goals. So Tony, can you talk about a little bit about SMART-based goals, why it's important, and how to actually then set it, so then you can then, as I said, focus on these process-based goals to then achieve the overall.
Yeah, absolutely. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and then time. Often people can switch the R for realistic, but I believe achievable and realistic are very similar. So I like going for relevant to make sure that actually these goals are going to be relevant to that long-term outcome goal that you're looking to achieve. So specific will be, making sure that it's something, really or pinpointing exactly what you want to do. So, for example, it could be something as just as simple as I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week. That's specific. Okay. Measurable. Well, already said 3 times, so I can measure that. And then achievable, realistically, your week better than what we do, but going to the gym 3 times a week seems fairly achievable. Relevant, of course, relevant. We're on an exercise podcast. So I'm assuming going to the gym would be relevant towards your goal, your long-term outcome goal. Time, well, we said we're going to do it within a week. So it's going to be time bound.
Yeah, amazing. And, when we say specific as well, we're not talking about, I want to lose weight, because that is not specific. So if you are someone that wants to lose weight, if you've got a few stone to lose, you might say, okay, I want to lose 10 kilograms. And then that then becomes measurable, and it's also specific because you can measure whether you've lost 10 kilograms or not. And again, coming back to the achievable, that probably is achievable for a lot of people, as long as we have the right time frame and we are, figuring out, have we catered for holidays, bit of time off, birthdays, Christmas, all that kind of stuff, because we don't want to be miserable while we're working towards losing that 10 kilograms, okay? Is it relevant for me? For a lot of people, it will be. And is it time bound or time restricted? So you might say, okay, 10 kilograms, let's set this 20, 25 weeks in order to do that. So that's when we're talking about actually making it specific. It's not, I want to lose weight, or I want to get stronger, or I want to do this. You're actually putting something. And then a part of that as well, so unbelievably important, is writing that goal down, because then it makes it real. Rather than just be like saying in your head, I want to lose 10 kg. What we want you to be doing is writing the goal down, telling other people about it, so you can then work towards. And then we're going to talk about the accountability piece later, but that's what we talk about. Rather than having this kind of like this wishy-washy, make sure you write it down. Make sure it's clear in your mind. Put it somewhere where you can see it, so you're often reminded of your goal and why you are working towards it. And then ultimately, that's what's going to make it realistic and achievable for you.
Yeah, 100%. And then for that relevant part, that's where you can really think to yourself and reflect. Classic me, I'm always going to be asking you to reflect, but reflecting on, okay, is that relevant to my deeper why? So you mentioned there, I want to lose 10 kilograms by this amount of time. Okay, fantastic. And that is going to be, links to, what's that why that's deeper, that's that long-term outcome goal in this case is going to be focused on. We then look at, okay, so let's take your example, because I really like having that. We've now got the outcome goal. Okay, so let's say, do we give a time frame?
I think realistically, and this is the thing, people think 10 kgs, 10 weeks, let's go. And that's not considering like life, all the social occasions that get in the way. So setting kind of, let's do 22 weeks, because that's on average about £1 a week. Okay,
there we go. So 22 weeks, okay, 10 kilos. Now what do we have to do to ensure that we can get there? Okay, well, we now need to start making those boring weekly schedules, right? And starting to plan it in. But we can, utilize how we know the brain works in the way of having our performance-based goals. Okay, so performance-based goals, they're slightly more controllable than the outcome-based goal, because what we can do is start changing our perspective on, how we reward ourselves. So we don't just only reward ourselves when we hit 10 kg in 22 weeks. We want to give ourselves little mini wins, little mini rewards that we can do along the way. So for example, it could obviously be breaking down that 10 kg into even using pounds, because obviously pounds are a little bit easier to realistically hit on a regular basis, right? Or can we just literally break it down to, okay, 3 times a week we're going to go to the gym. And then how do you start rewarding yourself? Because the reason why performance goals are so useful is whenever you achieve a goal, you get that feeling of like self-mastery, which then releases things such as dopamine. You then also build confidence. You're starting to get endorphins come in. And that's why they're so crucial, because often we set the long-term goal, but we forget that actually it's the day in, day out that gets mundane, and it can sometimes just feel like you're getting nowhere. But okay, well, what can I do to reward myself, weekly or daily, so that these these performance goals are actually being not accounted for, but actually being recognized, and you're actually being able to say to yourself, you know what, fair play, Dave, I turned up 3 times this week. I'm going to give myself this type of reward. Now, probably not a reward that's going to go completely against everything you just worked on. But yeah, some form of reward. Dave, have you ever used that?
Yeah, 100%. And for me, it could be, going out, taking 10 minutes, spending a little bit long in the sauna or a spa or whatever it is. It could be, giving yourself that time off to then like go and watch some Netflix or whatever you've been doing. Because if you've been obviously really, really solid and sticking to your performance-based goals, it's important that you actually celebrate and take that time in order to, you know, as we mentioned earlier, once you've hit that bit or hit that specific goal, then you're taking that time, you're rewarding yourself, and then that then leads to more action, more motivation, and then it's like this consistent cycle of, you know, proving to yourself that you can hit those goals along the way and those milestones to get to your big outcome-based goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the final one we've got is our process goals. Okay. So process goals, we're not really worrying about the performance. We're more just worrying about that discipline part, right? And it was Chris Williamson who said on his podcast, you know, discipline never looks impressive in the moment. Okay. It's those tiny, small little things that you're doing every day to to bring yourself towards that long-term impressive outcome goal of I've lost 10 kilos. Okay, so it's those, what are the small things you need to be doing each day, which often come down to habits. Okay, so those process goals are very similar to building those habits. So what are those habits I need to build in every day to make sure that I'm taking those small steps towards the short-term performance goals, okay, which are then going to keep me on that journey or keep me going up those steps towards a long-term outcome goal.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. So again, linking this back to how you guys can use it, and sorry for giving you homework, but again, we want you to take actionable stuff from this podcast so then you can really start implementing it in your life. So think about this outcome-based goal, right? So again, we'll use the example, we want to lose 10 kilograms. And then what we're talking about in terms of the process goals is what are those daily habits that are going to get you towards that 10 kilograms? So that could be tracking your calories, having a high protein meal 3 times a day, getting a minimum of 7 hours sleep, hitting a step target that's 2,000 more than what you're currently doing. It could be 10K, it could be anything that fits into your lifestyle. It could be going to the gym 3 times a week. So these are the little daily habits that are going to help you push that needle towards your overall outcome-based goal. So you actually need to sit down and write, okay, so what are these daily things that I need to be doing in order to hit this? Because if you are not doing those things, then ultimately, then this big outcome goal feels like it's a million miles away and you're really going to struggle to hit it. So what can you do in the day to tick those boxes to then make sure that you're working towards that goal? So if you need to be really, really clear in your head, what are the things that can help you move towards that goal? And then how can you move that needle every single day so you can feel like you're on that streak and that you are ultimately winning and achieving that goal?
That was pretty powerful. Awesome. What do we need to cover next to keep everyone moving and keep everyone, you know, allow people to be more likely to achieve that goal?
I think, you know, what we speak about as well is ultimately controlling the controllables, because there are going to be things that crop up and there are going to be something that you can't control, and that could be, you know, your scale weight or something like that, or if you get injured. So how are we going to make sure that we're controlling our controllables in order to hit as many of those daily habits every single day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, controlling the controllables. You hear it all the time. It almost, I think it gets used to the point where it's almost like it becomes like white noise. Everyone's like, oh, controlling controllables, switch off. I've heard that before. But the reason why we mention it is because it's so important. Again, we talk about that outcome goal that is a little bit less, it's a bit uncontrollable. So you're then going to be demotivated. Well, it's looking at, okay, what happens in my week that is within my control, or how can I really try and control and minimize the chances and the possibility of uncontrollable events happening that are going to stop me from actually being able to do these small little habits. And my prime example is someone turns around and says, I know that I've looked at my week, I know that on Wednesday is the most likely time that I can actually go to the gym in the morning because I'm going to work from home and the gym is around the corner, or I can go for a run or a bike ride because I can actually shower at home, set myself up for the day and then start doing my work. Fantastic. What happens when that alarm goes off at 6 a.m? Well, I'm tired. I don't want to get out of bed because I end up watching Netflix last night and I want to know who the killer was. Great. You watched Netflix last night, but that's how you've sort of by not looking at and mapping out your week and thinking, okay, actually Tuesday night, I need to make sure that I'm going to bed at a reasonable time, 10:30, 11 o'clock, so I can still get a good amount of sleep so that when I wake up in the morning, I'm not as drained, I'm not as shattered, and I'm also not going to ruin the rest of my day by dragging myself out of bed and going to do that bit of exercise.
And that's it. So what we're talking about there is obviously the bit you can control there. You can't really control your work schedule. The bit that you can control is getting to bed at an early time in order to make it as easy as possible for you to then be able to do that in the morning. So I think that's a great example. And ultimately, we want you guys to be, taking that little bit of extra time to then plan out the week. How does that look like for you? How can I make sure that I'm achieving as many of those individual processed, daily tasks in order to move myself in the right direction? Want to become a stronger, better, and faster runner? You don't need another cookie cutter program. You need a coach. Cooper is the coach in your pocket who provides real expertise, real structure, and real accountability. And because you're a Move Well, Live Well listener, you'll get an extended 2-week free trial when you sign up and use the code MOVEWELL on the app. Cooper, not a plan, a coach. Okay, and now to the favorite bit, which is how are you going to celebrate, obviously, when you do hit your goal? Because again, this is so important, and it's something that I've really struggled in the past, is actually, it's taking that time to celebrate and, what are you going to do when you achieve that milestone? Because ultimately, we want to be working towards these goals. But if you don't do anything that when you get there, then it can often, you kind of get in this cycle of what's next for me, because you haven't celebrated it properly. You can't recognize where the milestones are. So then sometimes it can be difficult to then get going again. And for me, for example, when I've hit X amount of followers or whatever it is, my brothers actually sometimes needs to say to me, Dave, how are you going to celebrate this? Because I can be as bad as probably you, maybe sometimes, Tony, for a lot of you listening out there, where it's like, so you achieve one thing and it's on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. But ultimately, what is it all for if you're not taking that time out and actually appreciating, one, how far you've come, and two, where you are on your journey? So for me, when I hit 100,000 followers on Instagram, it was pretty much exactly 1 year after I went on a camping trip to Scotland with my friends. The year before, I just come back from traveling, spent my life savings, literally didn't have a pot to piss in. And those boys had to sort me out for that weekend, and they really paid my way. And I felt so unbelievably bad. 1 year on, the business was flourishing. We'd hit that milestone. And for me, it wasn't anything extravagant. It wasn't buying a Rolex or a sports car, whatever it is. It was simply repaying those mates and taking them out for a meal. And for me, that was such a huge milestone in my journey. And that really lit the fire in my belly once again to be like, now next year, I want to be doing something even bigger and something better for them. So ultimately, only you can decide how you want to celebrate and what's important to you. Just know that it is important, and for you to, when you are writing down these goals, the overall goal, the daily steps that you're going to take into achieving that, but also we want you to write out, so when or if I achieve this goal, hopefully when, you've actually got that thing in your head, I'm going to celebrate by doing this. I'm going to take my family on holiday. I'm going to do X, Y, or Z. And then ultimately, when you come back and you've celebrated and recognized that, you can then move forward onto the next stage. And that's how we can keep building, keep progressing, and ultimately keep pushing to be better.
Yeah. I don't know about you guys listening, but I'm sure Dave feels the same way as me. But those little process goals, which end up being your performance goals. So I'm going to go to the, process goal is I'm going to go to the gym today and do 5 exercises. Fantastic. Performance goal is by the end of the week, I've gone and done 3 exercises. I've gone to the gym 3 times. A really nice small reward or an incentive is, if I do this 3 times, I can then go and buy myself a new gym top, right? Or I can then go and, perhaps look at paying for a new membership at a gym because I now know I'm going on the regular, so I can actually justify spending that much money. So it's these small little incentives that make actually going and exercising more attractive and more appealing for us as well.
I think that's an absolutely fantastic point. And for any runners listening to this, you'll know that when you hit that running goal and you get some new runners, that is one hell of a milestone, and that adds another 10 points to your running.
Yeah, 100%. And again, it's that case of being accountable and saying, I will not buy those runners until I have done X, Y, and Z, because otherwise you're going to defeat the whole point and you're going to be giving into that short term, want to get the dopamine hit, want to get that release, which we'll discuss in a future episode, why we do that and what's going on within our brains. But yeah, it's that idea of, let's get really smart with those rewards. What is it you've been looking forward to doing in the week? And you know that what if you say, I won't let myself do it now until I've done X, Y, Z, how good is that going to feel? And then that's going to drive that motivation to keep going, because we know motivation is fantastic when you have it. It's probably the reason why you set that initial goal in the first place. But in order to ensure that we're maintaining it, we need to do these little performance goals, the mini performance goals that could probably be linked to some of the process goals as well, to actually keep you on track and keep you on the path.
Boom. Absolutely unreal. So hopefully, what we've already covered from today, you can now understand, the importance of setting goals and obviously finding that deeper why and that, that sense of purpose to really push you on to the next thing, because it's really important that we're not always like kind of stationary and we're always like moving forward, because as you mentioned, that sense of purpose is so important to, your personal confidence and that sense of fulfillment in your life. Hopefully, obviously, you understand how to set those goals, first by understanding that deeper why, and then getting the SMART template out and really going through what's specific, what's measurable, what's achievable, what's relevant, and what can be, and how can you make that time bound. And then obviously taking the outcome based goal, which hopefully you've written down and made specific, it's not pacific, and then breaking down the process goals in order to achieve that big outcome. What are you doing on a daily basis in order to make that a reality? Thinking about what are the controllables and priming your environment to make that as easy as possible. And then obviously, what is that big overall win when you do hit it? How are you going to celebrate, and what are the milestones along the way to keep you on track? So hopefully, that's been made really clear for you guys. And then we always like to leave one with a quote, which will be coming into the minute, which I've got the pleasure of bringing to you guys today. But also we want to leave you guys with some questions that you can ask yourself in order to get there. So the first one we want you to ask yourself is, what is it that you want to achieve? What is it that you want to achieve right now? And most importantly, why?
Question number 2, will working towards this goal truly make you happy, or is it someone else's goal?
Question number 3, what are the daily tasks that you need to do in order to achieve this goal?
And question 4, how are you going to celebrate when you eventually achieve this goal?
And that is the best question to ask yourself. Let's go.
Now, Dave, quick one before we get on to the quote of the day. What goal are you going to set?
Oh, brother did not hit me with this. Okay. So for me, I set myself a goal and I wrote them down. I actually did, I guess you could call it like a mood/vision board, but we're well on the way. My goals for the year were to get 1 million followers across platforms, and we achieved that in June. So big up. It's to have 100 recurring clients in my community, and we've got about 200 in there now. And we're working towards that. We got one more challenge, 6-week challenge for the rest of the year. It was to start a podcast, so boom, bosh that off. And it was to run up my biggest Fel Fitness community event and to get 2,500 followers. So we're on about 2,300 followers on that. But all the other goals that I've written down, and if anybody would like access to this, I'm more than happy to take a picture and share it on the Move Well Live Well Instagram page, so you guys can see what the goals were that I've written down. I had Q3 goals, I had overall goals for the year, and then I had what the daily actions to do that, what do I need to do more of to help me get there, and what do I need to do less of. And for me, a big part of that was saying no more, because I'm just such a sucker for saying yes to everything, and going forward from there. But you put me on the spot, Tony, so I'm going to put you back on the spot. What are your goals for the rest of this year, or for the overall 2025?
Yeah, so I was in a different spot to you. Obviously, I'm not celebrating anywhere near 500,000 followers, or 1 million followers, sorry, on all platforms. My actual goal for the first half of the year was just to network and get people to know what sports psychology was, and hopefully get literally 5 clients a week come through to me, with hopefully the goal of eventually having 20 clients a week. The networking did pay off, so I'm now at that case of I've got 20 clients coming through on the regular, on the week, which is fantastic. The other goal was also to start a podcast because I believe that, especially with sports psychology, it's not something you can just take a picture of. It's something that you have to show through words and through getting people to sort of think and reflect and perhaps see the world in a different way, which will hopefully, as we work through the podcast, you'll start being able to see. But my current goal at the moment is just to get back to running. So I've actually since June had my original goal back in June was to actually run the Rome half and go for a specific time. Unfortunately, got an injury, so I've been out for nearly 3 months, and it's actually just to run 10k again with no pain, and then hopefully be able to run the Rome half again in October and just complete it. Because at the moment I've got a really nasty IT band injury, which is slowly getting better, but it's one of those ones where you just have to be patient. So my goal is simply just to run again, and I'm having to swallow the ego and do some short, slow runs. So we'll see if I can continue that process goal of short, slow runs, and get that performance goal of once a week, not having any pain.
Well, good luck. And those injury ones, they're always the hardest, right?
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Moving on to one of our favourite bits of the show, and leaving you guys with a quote. And this quote is genuinely has been life-changing for me. I think about this every time I'm going through something difficult or I've got to have a conversation. I think about this quote and it really, really helps me through those tough times. So it's, your success in life is determined by the amount of difficult conversations you're willing to have. And that could be with anybody in your family. It could be with a partner. It could be with someone from work. And any time that I need to tell someone bad news, or I need to negotiate, or I need to go in to a conversation with someone, I know it's going to be really difficult when I think about this. And I think if I can go in and if I can have that difficult conversation and it doesn't always have to be a positive outcome, but you're just building that confidence that we mentioned. If I can do that, then that directly translates to how successful I will be in life. And that really pushes me through and gets me motivated and sets me in that mindset of like, all I need to do is have this difficult conversation and then I will be more successful because of that.
Yeah, I think it's a great quote. It's a really powerful quote. Obviously, for myself, in my work, I'm consistently having these difficult conversations with people. And I actually had a really interesting reflection with a client. They'd finished the 6 sessions with me. They'd escaped me finally. But they turned around and they said, actually, before joining the session, I think they said it happened to them twice. They found themselves actually not wanting to go and not wanting to have to sort of peel back the layers and think about stuff in a deeper way and almost have that difficult discussion with themselves, but also, with me. But they said that each time they did that, they came away feeling so much better. And they were actually like, oh, that's why I go and do this. Right? That's what I benefit from this. I have a clear understanding. And actually it's that often we want to avoid discomfort, right? So we find ourselves trying to find any reason or any excuse to not do it when we know that actually just swallowing that uncomfortable feeling that we might have the first few seconds and just going ahead and doing this, having that tough conversation will have a much bigger long-term impact again, right? The long-term impact over the short-term, gain of avoiding something. So I think for me, it really just screams that have that difficult conversation. Don't try and, lean into avoidance, be the opposite. Start actually taking control of your life and not letting yourself get controlled by short-term releases.
I think that was the perfect example to really hammer home that point. And again, it's that you never know what the outcome can be, but if you are willing to have that difficult conversation, it's going to be a positive one.
Boom.
Perfect. Well, thank you as always, guys, to anybody who was listening with us today. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Pass it on to a friend who might want to hear this. And we can't wait to see you guys in the next episode.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys.